I'm an 18-year-old female, and I live with my parents on their farm. We have a relatively big house, with a nice back patio. We got a hot tub a while back, which my parents use a lot, and I sometimes join them. Since I have my own car, my parents have gotten more comfortable with leaving me at the house when they leave for extended periods of time. The longest they've been gone is almost a week, and they keep in contact with me the entire time. I just take care of our animals and chill out if I'm not working, and I've gotten used to being alone. My parents were both raised in farming, ranching families, but I was a city kid until they bought a farm and moved us out here. I am used to it now, but it took quite a bit of acclimating considering I'd lived in our previous house for 13 years and knew the city like the back of my hand. You could have placed me anywhere, and I'd be able to find my way back home one way or another. Anyway, this took place a few weeks ago, and my parents had gone to a distant cousin's wedding, leaving me at the house to overlook the farm. I was fine with this, as I didn't really know the said cousin very well, but sent my well wishes with my parents. We sent constant updates back and forth the few days they were gone. I believe it was the second or third night. I'd gotten home from work absolutely exhausted. I decided to relax in the hot tub for a bit to soothe my sore muscles before going to bed. I'm a bit of a night owl, so by the time I'd taken a nap and had dinner, it was around 11 p.m., and the sun had pretty much set. Another one of my favorite things about living on a farm is the lack of light pollution. I can look up and easily see the stars above me. I've always been into astrology and astronomy, and I love stargazing. That was part of the reason I waited so long before going out to the hot tub. I went out and got myself settled. I sat in the water, enjoying the stars, heat, and occasionally sipping my drink I'd brought out with me. It was still light enough that I could see the edge of our property, but dark enough that I could see the stars relatively well. I was probably out there for about 10 minutes or so. That was when I got a sudden chill down my spine, and it wasn't from the breeze on my heated skin. It felt like I was being watched. Immediately, I snapped out of my daze and turned to where I felt like it was coming from. It took my eyes a bit to adjust, as I'm nearsighted and didn't wear my glasses outside. And that's when they did. I felt my stomach drop at what I saw. From the patio, looking straight ahead, you could see our barn, which has some fences connected to make a couple of pens. Our older horses are in the largest pen to the right of the barn, and behind the pen is a large field that stretches to a row of saplings. Behind the saplings is a barbed wire fence, which indicates the edge of our property. To the left of the barn is a patch of trees that led into the forest that surrounds the property. Though there is a few divots here and there, where we've set up some other farm things like a garden and chicken coop. While I couldn't see directly behind the barn, I could see beyond it, into the field behind the pens, which is where I spotted what I figured caused my feelings of unease. A few feet of the forest, standing between two of the saplings at the edge of our field, was a figure of what I assumed was a person, just standing there in the darkness. I immediately knew that that's where the feeling was coming from. I stood up in the hot tub and turned to face the person. For a few moments, I just stood there, looking at them. I didn't know if they saw me, but when they didn't move after staring at me for a solid minute, I decided enough was enough and got out of the hot tub. I closed up everything as quickly as I could, while trying not to look panicked, and went inside. This is where I immediately turned on all the lights, shut all the windows, and locked all of the doors. My dogs had been inside the whole time, none the wiser to the trespasser. I figured it'd be best if I didn't alert them as to what was going on, in case it turned out to be nothing, even though I was pretty sure I was right about what I'd seen. I debated on calling the police, but I lived 20 minutes from the nearest town, so by the time they got there, the person would likely be gone. Besides, it was already midnight, and I didn't want to wake up my neighbors with the commotion the authorities may bring. I resolved to sit in the living room with my dogs and keep an eye on the person from the inside. Our living room has windows that face outside in the same direction our back door to the patio does, so I could see the same view from the hot tub, albeit a little more difficult with the lights on. But ever since I've seen the figure, it was impossible not to notice them afterward. The thought crossed my mind to grab my stepdad's rifle from the basement, but I have no idea where he stored it or even how to use it. The more time passed, the more antsy I became. The person was just standing there, not doing anything, in the same position I'd spotted them in, and their apparent lack of motive was unnerving to me like nothing else. I resolved that, if they didn't leave within the next half an hour, I'd call the police, because at this point, the person would have to be standing there for about an hour, trespassing on our property. More time passed. I stayed in the living room with my phone in hand and dogs at my feet, looking out the window every few minutes to see if the figure was still there, which they were. By now, it was 12:15 in the morning, and they still hadn't moved. It was 12:20 when things finally changed. As I was looking out of the window for probably the 50th time that night, I saw the figure move. I froze, not moving a muscle, as I watched them turn and walk back the way I assumed they'd come, to the left where they disappeared behind the barn. My relief was only temporary, because while they were gone, they could still very well be on our property, just hiding out in the trees. Finally, the feeling of being watched was gone, and it made me feel a little bit better, but not by much. I decided to pull an all-nighter, and stayed up until the sun rose, and I decided to pass out on the couch. I woke up around 1 p.m., and had a moment where I thought I dreamt the whole thing. Just in case, after I finished my chores, I made my way across the field behind the animal's pen to our property line, and walked from one end to the other to see where the figure would have disappeared to behind the barn. I also wanted to see if I could find anything out of the ordinary. It had been dry for the past week, so the grass and dirt didn't show any footprints or sign of anyone being there at all. This made me suspect that maybe I imagined the whole thing. I have a history of being paranoid because of my anxiety, and have had multiple nervous breakdowns over things that turned out to be inconsequential. Still, I couldn't just forget about the feeling I'd gotten in the hot tub that night. The unmistakable feeling of having someone's eyes on me, not being able to tell who. To this day, I still have no idea what it could have been. To be honest, I don't really want to know. Three years ago, I bought my first apartment in a working-class area. The apartment overlooked a busy arterial road, which is the main connection for people headed to or from the highway, so it sees a lot of traffic. For the most part, living there was fine, but this one incident ruined living in that area for me. I work in the city, and parking is expensive, so normally I get the bus for my commute. It was actually pretty convenient, because the bus stop was outside my apartment, so it was almost door to door. I got off the bus after work one evening, and there was a man standing there. He approached me and said his car had broken down because he'd run out of gas. He pointed south down the road to his car, but there was no broken down car I could see. He was holding a gas can. He wanted me to walk about 5 minutes down the road to a gas station. I was creeped out by this guy, and I couldn't see his car that he kept talking about, so I said no. At first he said that's fine, and he started to walk away. But then he turned back and tried to punch me. I then ran out across the busy street to get away from him while he screamed something. He said he would be remembering my blue-colored eyes, and if he saw me, he'd kill me. I kept running across the road, dodging cars. I didn't want him to know that I lived at the apartments, so I took the long route around the entrance on a different street. About an hour later, the same man was caught on CCTV trying to break into each apartment building in our complex. He was also caught trying to do the same thing at an apartment complex down the road too. That put me off getting the bus at night for a while. I'm a teenager who helps out his dad on the allotment. If you don't know, an allotment is like a mini farm. You can plant veggies, have animals like chickens or rabbits to care for, and other things. This happened recently, and this still creeps me out. In the evening, my dad says we need to go to the allotment to feed our chickens, as he forgot to feed them earlier that day. It was around 8 p.m. when I agreed, and we went to the car to start driving. When we got to our allotment, which is like a 15-minute drive, it was already dark outside. Not a lot, but dark. I opened the gates, let my dad drive in, and then closed them. As I was about to think, I saw a black car outside. The car belonged to a guy that used to be chill with my dad, but they both kind of fell off from talking to each other. My dad said he was becoming more mentally ill, as the guy had had a divorce and got his kids taken by the mother. The guy lives on the allotment now, even sleeps there. There's also other people who have a spot in this allotment as well, but as of now, there's only me, my dad, and the guy here. After my dad parked the car, we got out and started getting the food for the chickens out of the trunk. While my dad was doing that, I looked at his ex-friend's allotment, only to see him staring at us. It was dark, so I could only see a shadow of him, but I knew he was staring at us. I also had a gut feeling, but I decided to ignore it. We went and fed the chickens, and were about to go home until my dad almost forgot something. He went to the shed at the end of the allotment to go grab something, and I was going to enter, but had a feeling I needed to wait out instead. As I asked my dad how much longer until he finds what he needed, I turned back to face our gate being opened. I didn't see it at first, but saw the guy trying to enter quietly. He stared at me and slowly closed the gate before just disappearing. I didn't react or say anything. I just stood there. I thought of telling my dad, but didn't want to scare him or something. In the end, this isn't a horror movie where I should scream like a girl. My dad left the shed, and now we can go. As we were leaving, we heard a sound like an axe hitting wood nonstop. We knew something was wrong, so we quickly walked to our car, started it, and went to the gate. I left the car creeped out because of that guy going around the allotment. I quickly opened the gate and let my dad drive through. As I was closing the gate, I saw something that terrified me on the spot. The guy was just standing there, 20 meters away from me, staring. I couldn't see any details but just the darkness on him. He was holding something in his hand, but then he just moved and went into some bushes. My dad got out of the car to lock the gate. He looked at the bushes through the closed gate and then rushed into the car. When we left and started driving, I asked my dad if he saw what I saw, and he saw someone hiding in the bushes, squatting and looking at us. My dad said he saw him holding something too. It looked like an axe or a knife. We left terrified, but tried to laugh it off, knowing we were probably close to being attacked, or worse, dead. We went back to the allotment at the same time around 8 p.m. a few days after what happened. We saw the guy's car in the allotment, and we knew we needed to be quick with feeding the chickens. As we did, everything was going fine until as we were about to leave, my dad stopped me and we hid over a blue shed. My dad said, "He's there. He's in the bushes." My heart dropped. I told my dad where he was, and he said 5-second walk and we're done. We quickly ran to the car, closed it, and drove off. For a second I saw him. He did have an axe,